Gwen Stefani reigned over rock music in the mid-90s, then pop in the mid-2000s, until the 2010s. 2020s. In this video, I will make a deep dive into the discography of Gwen Stefani since her solo debut in the 2000s, providing an overview of each era and discussing her current situation. My name is Henrique and welcome to Henrique Resenha, a channel that talks about music in a critical perspective. So what's the reason behind Gwen making a pop solo album? Let's begin recapping a few things about No Doubt's story. If you don't know anything about the band or want to know more details about them, please go watch this past video. Here we will focus on Gwen's solo career, okay? But in short, No Doubt's story is marked by a long and arduous journey before they could achieve a minimum level of recognition. Like, it took almost 10 years for them to go from an unknown local band from Anaheim with 2 albums released that no one had heard to become one of the most successful bands of the 90s just with Tragic Kingdom. The follow-up album, released 5 years later after a development hell, wasn't that successful. Actually, it was kind of failure, but a year later they would release another album and have a new peak. By 2003, the band would have spent about 16 years in activity without taking any pauses. It was project after project and tour after tour. So they decided it was finally a good time for a hiatus, giving themselves more chance to have time with their families and working solo projects. In my No Doubt video, I have talked about how Gwen had built a public image that was much bigger than the band itself, so opportunities weren't lacking for her. She was already doing some side projects like collaborations, and the launch of her high fashion label, Lamp, which is actually her biggest personal creative venture, with yearly collections and self-made designs. In one of the first Gwen's interviews about recording a solo album, she talked about writing with her bandmate Tony Kanal with no real expectations. Gwen grew up listening to ska and new wave bands thanks to her older brother, but Tony, her first boyfriend, introduced her to dance pop music and R&B. Even though No Doubt has always been very much pop and eclectic, they are a rock band and naturally have some stylistic boundaries. So this side of Gwen's musical taste was something she felt that could only be explored in a solo project, what she commonly described as a silly dance record.
There was a real kind of clear kind of record I wanted to make in my head, like I was being, inspired by like the backdrop of my high school years, like groups like Club Nouveau, The Time, Prince, Lisa Cult Jam. I'm trying to think, Debbie Deb had that song Lookout Weekend with a huge inspiration. Early Madonna tracks, Depeche Mode, The Cure. Really wasn't looking to try to make an art record or a record that was gonna be my solo debut of spilling my heart out. That's not what this was about. It was a side project, clearly trying to make really guilty pleasure songs that you want to hear over and over and dance to.
Gwen always insisted that she was making this album just for fun. In her eyes, it was also much less personal than her albums with No Doubt, because she ended up collaborating with a list of top-tier producers and songwriters, and that was a big contrast to No Doubt, where she was in the center of the songwriting process. Even so, it still took nearly 2 years for the album to be finished because she was never satisfied. That insecurity is actually one of the central themes of the lead single What You Waiting For, which was one of the first songs recorded for this project. Linda Perry wrote it almost as a wake-up call for Gwen to stop self-sabotaging herself. I'm not going to dive into this album because there is a lot more to discuss here. What you need to know is that what started as a casual side project became Love Angel Music Babe. And with Interscope fully behind it, it gradually turned into a blockbuster that was almost impossible to fail. The rollout was incredibly smart. No Doubt stayed active throughout 2004, which helped ease more skeptical fans into the idea of Gwen doing dance pop. She also reunited with Eve after the massive success of Let Me Blow Your Mind, the collaboration that gave Gwen her first major crossover hit outside the rock sphere. Then came the third single, Hollaback Girl, which was a shocking moment among longtime fans and parts of the music press. At the same time, it became such a huge commercial success that it came surprisingly close to matching the impact of Don't Speak. And of course, it's impossible to talk about Love Ain't Your Music Babe without mentioning one of its defining concepts, the Harajuku Girls. They were four dancers who accompanied Gwen throughout the album's promotion and later inspired the Harajuku Lovers brand.
All right. You know, it's kind of like, can you see them right now?
I can see them.
You can see them?
Can you?
Because I thought they were my fantasy and I didn't know they were real.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then one day, like, I was dreaming about them and the next thing I know, it's like, what?
All of a sudden.
I was looking and they were there. I didn't know that you could see them, though.
Contrary to what some people believe today, this concept was controversial from the very beginning. It was heavily criticized on blogs and internet forums of that time. Since then, Gwen has been repeatedly asked about it in interviews and has always tried to defend it, sometimes in the worst ways possible. Personally, I think a lot of the criticism ended up being focused too much in the idea of cultural appropriation, when the bigger issue was the problematic imagery they ended up showing. Liking or not, the Harajuku Girls reproduce some of the most common stereotypes about East Asian women portrayed in the mainstream media. Also, their role in the album was quite confusing. And here I think Gwen lost a great opportunity to work with Japanese artists and designers to have a respectable and meaningful relationship with them. There's a lot more to say about this album and I would love to dedicate an entire video about it someday. So if you like to see that or have another topic in mind, leave a comment and please subscribe. Your support helps me to make more videos like this. Later in 2005, Pharrell invited Gwen back into the studio where they worked on more music, and 2 new songs were added in the Harajuku Lovers tour, which kicked off in the end of that year in the United States. At the final show, she even announced that she was expecting her first child, a lifelong dream she would talk it about in interviews. So throughout 2006, she split her time between motherhood, her clothing line, and recording new music. There were also a few writing sessions with No Doubt, but they ultimately didn't prove productive. So instead, Gwen continued working on what would become her second solo album. This Sweetscape came out much faster than its predecessor, but as a complete album, it feels a bit purposeless and I think it's less cohesive than the previous one. It didn't reach the same commercial heights of Love Ain't Your Music Babe, but thanks to its single title, The Sweetscape had fair numbers and was supported by a world tour throughout 2007. At the final show, No Doubt promised a comeback, but from that point on, it was mostly cycles of recording attempts, delays and postponed plans. I followed this era pretty closely and I remember people asking whether she would ever done another pop solo album. Her answer was almost always the same, that her solo career had been just a fun detour and that she wasn't planning on make dance music again. No Doubt's Push and Shove was finally released toward the end of 2012. Commercially, it underperformed and soon the band wouldn't hide their disappointment with it. They've hinted a few times that they were working on new music, but ever since then, No Doubt has mostly resurfaced on occasional shows and some festivals. In 2014, Gwen joined The Voice alongside Pharrell, who was in the middle of a huge career resurgence himself. It was during that time that he convinced Gwen to record a third solo album, to the excitement of some fans and to disappointment of others. Now let's think together. By this point, nearly 2 decades had passed since the release of Tragic Kingdom, and the music industry had changed a lot. Because I think Gwen managed to maintain a remarkable presence in the mainstream of these 2 decades, but in a way that often felt manufactured. What I'm saying is that her newer work wasn't culturally relevant anymore, and even the wave of 90s and 2000s nostalgia was enough to build a meaningful connection to younger audiences. When she returned to solo recording, she followed a process common to many pop singers of listening to batches of demos in search of material to assemble an album. A few singles and collaborations came out of this type of recording, but an almost complete album ended up being shelved. Gwen admitted that the songs were not authentic, but also none of the released songs had a commercial impact. But at the end of 2015, Gwen divorces Gavin Rossdale and after surprising everyone, started dating the country singer Blake Shelton. All of that became the inspiration of the weekly week. This is what the truth feels like, or as I like to call, this is what working with the most generic and uninspired producers feels like. This is what the point that the manufacturer presence that I said earlier became more obvious. Interscope invested in a big promotion as they always does, and Gwen promoted everywhere, but that didn't translate it into sales. The first two singles performed reasonably well, but I think the clearest sign was the tour that struggled to sell tickets, even in relatively small venues. Determined to keep making questionable decisions, she released a Christmas Standards album in 2017, which has basically been dusted off and repackaged every holiday season ever since. In 2019, she fully embraced the honky-tonk cowgirl aesthetic in her Vegas residence, by which point she already appeared on several Blake songs. Then, completely out of nowhere, she released the single Let Me Reintroduce Myself in the end of 2020. Once again, she described it as something she made just for fun with no grand plan behind it. I actually found it to be a very interesting single because it reflects in everything that happened since her debut with No Doubt, including her unexpected detour into country music. Sonically, it also hinted to a pop album influenced by Jamaican genres, although that was oversaturated at the time following that trend of tropical pop. Another single eventually came out, honestly one of her most awful songs ever, but the album, rumored to be titled Anaheim Hillbillies, was shelved without any explanation. If you are enjoying the video, don't forget to leave a like, it really helps the channel. Now let's jump to late 2024 to this current era, to the album Bouquet, and somehow things will get even more confusing. Again, out of nowhere, Gwen Stefani was there releasing a country pop album. Well, she says it's a yacht rock album, but honestly, the songs of this album sounds like every song from a country pop playlist. Still, the promotion focused on the adult contemporary audience, yet even then likely didn't hurt the album. Despite all of that, I don't think it's a bad record.
I like it in here.
My biggest issue with Bouquet is Scott Hendrick's production, which I think is incredibly bland. But in terms of concept and overall cohesion, I actually find the album surprisingly convincing and sincere. In many ways, it goes back to the same themes of this is what the truth feels like, except now she's writing from the perspective of being married to Blake, without the flowers metaphor. It definitely has its corny moments, but overall is a pretty solid album. It was during the promotion of Bouquet that the political controversies take it off. All of them center around the ads for the Catholic Hallow App. Going straight to the point, Gwen is Catholic, she has always been, and she has always spoken about it. For a few years now, she and other outsider celebrities have been promoting this Hallow App, a Catholic prayer app with various connections to far-right figures. In one of her most controversial ads, she quoted on Twitter a podcast video featuring the commentator Tucker Carlson. Although that podcast is hosted on Hallow and it is mainly religious talk, Carlson is another well-known far-right figure and former Trumpist. In others, she prayed urging people to not have abortions, which I think is an obvious position to expect from a Catholic person. People are speculating that Gwen has turned Republican since she started dating Blake Shelton, although Blake himself claimed to not care about politics. The last time Gwen spoke about this matter in 2021, she said that it was pretty obvious her position. Well, not anymore. We know these American celebrities love to play nice on both sides. Even the ones that appears to be super political conscious ended up having some weird connections. And I believe Gwen is still on this path. or at least trying to because she hadn't made any official statement or something directly that would leave no doubt, while also dodging certain situations. And why her politics matters? Well, it depends on how much you are politically conscious, but I would just say that it's no surprise that these Hallow ads started in this Bouquet era, adding the Christmas album, because it's part of an image strategy aimed to older and conservative audience, people who usually listen to this kind of music. Also, we heard nothing about Hallow since No Doubt started the Sphere residence, but wait until the holidays when she brings back that Christmas album. Looking in retrospect, all these eras, including No Doubt, makes me think some things. Her first solo album was an experiment that succeeded beyond expectation, and led to another one. Then she had the second comeback that soon revealed a lack of public interest. And here we can think about different reasons, but I was comparing some touring data, and I realized that at least since 2012, No Doubt had better concert sales than Gwen's solo shows. The Sphere residence didn't have cheap tickets, and it sold out unlike Just a Girl in Vegas, for example. So what I'm saying is that I think No Doubt sustained a better fan base than Gwen solo. It doesn't surprise me that since 2016 she has incorporated No Doubt songs into her setlist, something she didn't do before. I could comment on more things, but I'll stick around. If you are still here, write bananas in the comments. All links and references used in this video will be in the pinned comment. Thanks for watching and I hope to see you soon. Bye!